Witam Was gorąco. Jesteśmy tutaj. To już jest pierwszy sukces. Pomyślcie sobie, myśleliście, że jeszcze nic dzisiaj wielkiego w Waszym życiu się nie wydarzyło, a jednak podjęliście decyzję, żeby wstać, żeby zadbać o siebie. Może nawet ktoś coś zjadł. Może nawet zjadł zdrowo. Ile to już jest małych sukcesów. Może ktoś się dzisiaj napił wody. Nie? To już są właśnie takie rzeczy. I teraz zaczynamy od tych 5 małych sukcesów. Więcej przed nami, bo konferencja niedługo startuje, ale mamy gorącą prośbę, bo chodzi o to, żebyśmy byli możliwie blisko siebie i żeby też to było komfortowe dla wszystkich, więc zależy nam na tym, żeby wszyscy siedzieli w tych miejscach, które właśnie są do tego przeznaczone. Te osoby, które usiadły tam powyżej tej barierki, to są tacy nasi trochę... osoby, które są do relokacji, że tak powiem. Na szczęście nie jesteśmy jeszcze w transmisji, bo zaraz będzie, że nawa i że relokacja, ktoś jeszcze doda, że przymusowa i będziemy mieli straszne kłopoty PR-owe. Więc gorąco Was zapraszam, jeśli to dla Was możliwe. Tutaj te miejsca są wszystkie eleganckie, w razie czego możecie podejść, zagadać do mnie, powiedzieć, że chcieliście tam usiąść, bo mieliście nadzieję, że ja do Was nie podejdę z mikrofonem. I ja wtedy już będę wiedział, że mam zakaz i się nie zastosuję. No więc pozdrawiam wszystkich, niebawem będziemy zaczynali. Dziękuję, że jesteście. Tak. To ja jestem gotowy. To dzień dobry, witam jeszcze raz gorąco. Mam nadzieję, że się wszyscy dobrze macie. Witam panią moderator, witam naszych panelistów, witam was. I mam pytanie, kto był z nami wczoraj na kolacji? O, a kto doczekał dania głównego? A kto doczekał później tego, że jeszcze były ciepłe dania? No właśnie. Przyszedłem dzisiaj opowiedzieć o tych ciepłych daniach, bo były naprawdę znakomite. Wiem, że nie wszyscy wczoraj zostali z nami długo, ale co, może po prostu już ktoś był wczoraj zmęczony. Kto wczoraj przed 22 już sobie poszedł? A teraz odważni, ci, którzy byli dłużej. O, tutaj są dwie dziewczyny. Co się działo po 22? Wszyscy są ciekawi.
Odwiedziliśmy taki lokal na rynku, ale nie pamiętam nazwy.
Nawet nie pamiętacie
tak
już nazwy.
Troszeczkę tam czas spędziliśmy.
Okej, bo w Krakowie są jakieś lokale, słyszałem.
Tak, jeden się okazało, akurat zamykali o 22, ale były też takie specjalne.
Później takie specjalne, co się bardzo długo otwierają. Ktoś z was zna takie lokale? Był kiedyś w takim lokalu, co jest po 22 otwarty? Tam kilka osób zna takie. A pan mówi, że pan zamykał go? Tak? Ale poważnie? Jak było z tym lokalem?
Szybko się zamknął ze względu bezpieczeństwa.
Ale zawsze tak mówią względy bezpieczeństwa, ale czyjego? Tego lokalu, czy tych uczestników?
Znaczy lokalowi już nic nie pomogło.
Aha. Ale tu mówimy cały czas o tej auli głównej?
Nie, o tych pięknych czerwonych szybkach na krakowskim rynku.
Piękne czerwone szyby na krakowskim rynku. Ktoś z państwa był tam? To nie było tam. Pan mówi, że nie poleca i że drogo. Czy ktoś kojarzy jakieś czerwone szyby na rynku krakowskim? O, może ten, kto mówi przez krótkofalówkę, bo przez chwilę coś słyszałem. Pani moderator była kiedyś w Krakowie na jakimś takim, no na rynku na przykład. O, i teraz to będzie mikrofon numer... To jest mikrofon numer 2, słuchajcie. O, Piotr właśnie jest już z nami, nasz realizator, więc będzie...
I może... I zadziałało.
No to ja.
Bardzo dziękuję. Ja tylko chciałam powiedzieć, że tutaj wszystkie osoby uczestniczące w naszym dzisiejszym panelu wczoraj nie imprezowały do późna, bo myśmy się przygotowywali do dzisiejszej dyskusji.
I właśnie, co się kryje pod tym hasłem?
Dzisiaj będziemy rozmawiać o bezpieczeństwie międzynarodowym w tym kontekście oczywiście.
So today we're going to discuss
Jest to ważny element
scientific security in the context of international cooperation, which is an important element of the strategy that is under discussion during this year's edition of the Congress. We believe that a response to important challenges might be the internationalization of higher education and science. We will try to prove it to you during our discussion panel. But of course, internationalization is not a panacea, is not a cure for everything, but it definitely is a boundary condition, the starting point, something that might be instrumental, and this is what we're going to discuss. Who is a representative of the world of humanities? Hands up. Those of you who have not raised their hands, are you all representatives of science? Social science. Some people say, right, lots of people representing social science. And you, are you a graduate of humanities? Well, I would say 50-50. German studies are in your background as well. Yes, that is one of my backgrounds. And would you also say
Nauki społeczne, tak?
that you represent social science? Yes, absolutely. International relations, so social science is very much an area that I specialize in. You are a master of, you hold an MA in journalism and an expert on terrorism and counteracting radicalization. Madam? So if you happen to be wondering what the link is between Dr. Katarzyna Maniszewska, our moderator, and the subject of our Congress, and the thematic session that we're about to begin, then let me explain it to you that Dr. Katarzyna Maniszewska is an expert on internationalization. For many years, you were the deputy rector for internationalization and international cooperation at the Civitas University. Absolutely, that is correct, which is why I've been invited to participate in the Congress. So how are we doing with the strategy? Let me abstain from voting as one of the co-authors. It depends on you, ladies and gentlemen. The strategy, and I think we can all agree on it, should not be a document that is imposed on you in a top-down manner. No, the document has been consulted in many different places, and those different consultation sessions were aimed at a situation where all of you representing different circles, different milieux, being engaged. Internationalization should be a holistic process that seeps through the different levels of the university structure. So you should treat the document as helpful, as useful for you in your daily practice. Is anyone familiar with Dr. Katarzyna Maniszewska? Lots of hands up. Are you familiar with our panelists? I suppose some of you are, but let me introduce them. Agnieszka Stefaniak-Hrycko, head of the Office for International Cooperation at the Polish Academy of Science. A round of applause is well deserved. Dr. Alexandra Gasztold, representing the Warsaw University and NASC. The National Center for Science is represented by Ms. Magdalena Dobrzańska-Bzowska. And last but not least, Dr. Daniel Boćkowski, Deputy Dean for the Development of the Department of International Affairs at the University of Białystok. But also reporting to the Polish Academy of Science and knowledgeable in terms of the topography of the city of Kraków. The moderator is Dr. Katarzyna Maniszewska, representing the Civitas University. Let us give a round of applause to all of the panelists and the moderator. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, the subject of the panel is academic security and freedom, and it refers to one of the sub-chapters of the strategy under discussion. One person who was really instrumental in drafting that chapter, Dr. Anna Flater-Zyberg, is absent, unfortunately. She used to represent the Polish Academy of Science, and now she represents the Polish Science Foundation. She has been instrumental in drafting that particular chapter on academic security and freedom, so I would like to extend my thank yous. Hopefully she's following us online. So, ladies and gentlemen, internationalization of science and higher education is one of the key instruments in terms of responding to global challenges. Professor Antonowicz once offered a certain framework to us with reference to those great challenges and the fact that the role of science has changed over the past decades, and in fact science should be capable of responding to some of those pertinent challenges. Now, the role of international cooperation in the context of academic security and freedom, as well as the dynamic technological change, is going to be the main thematic axis of this discussion panel. But let me begin with an opening question. I will try to tweak this question slightly, adjusting it to the panelists, namely the role of the university in terms of creating social resilience in the circumstances that we live in, that is the digital information war and huge polarization of political ideas. Professor, you're one of the greatest experts in internationalization, EU knowledge, and prevention of radicalization. That's the name of the committee that you're a member of. And you have just come back from Taiwan, where I imagine you have also dealt with the same subject area. Professor, could you please tell us what the role of university is in resilience building? And maybe you could draw on your experiences in Taiwan. I would say that the university plays an important role in many different areas. I believe that in the context of security, there needs to be cooperation with the private sector, with the public sector. There needs to be an exchange of expert opinions. There need to be ad hoc teams dedicated to solving particular problems. So all that is conducive to building and maintaining resilience. Science needs to stand on its feet. We need to be able to reach every single region and every single individual with the results of our research. And so I represent NASC and the Warsaw University, and what we promote is application-based research on disinformation or hostile influences. And at the center of disinformation analysis, what is prepared are regular reports on what goes on in the info zone, and we enter all sorts of consortia at an EU level. We are important entities of those European consortia. We gain new knowledge, but we also have real impact on new standards that are being prepared. At the Warsaw University, a research center has also been established to monitor disinformation in science. And so it is the fundamental task ahead of that center to sensitize the public on the significant subjects that may be promoted by pathological influencers in order to promote certain messages. Cybergia is another project that is aimed at supporting and educating teachers as well as other milieus. What I find missing in Poland, however, is tighter collaboration with NGOs. NGOs have been doing so much in terms of education in the area of digital hygiene. You know, it's like brushing your teeth. You can actually learn it. It can become a habit that you monitor your digital hygiene day in, day out. You know, we give smartphones to our kids. We place them in their hands, we pay the bills, but we often forget that for young persons, really, there is no significant difference between physical reality and digital reality. And when we conduct our research, we often adopt the position of the outsiders, those looking from the outside in. But for young persons, digital reality often blends with physical reality, and we need to be well aware of that. And we should know what knowledge consists in. What I can see is a lot of idealistic thinking or idealistic mindset that boils down to us believing that we can design reality in line with our worldview. But there are so many different worldviews, mind you. So for many years, I've been conducting research in the critical vein. I believe that there is no such thing as objective knowledge, but we can reach consensus. For scientific consensus to be possible, academic circles should not lock themselves up in bubbles. Ministries consult different projects, but consultation should encompass all the different social groups, not just your friends and buddies and those who think alike. We do not need to like each other, but we should recognize those with knowledge, competences, skills in the sector of security, because I will be focusing on the area of security. But unfortunately, when you browse through different lists of experts, you often see that there's a social key behind it. So institutions are also very often hierarchical. And, even if the selection criteria change, the hierarchy remains. And so what is instrumental in terms of international cooperation, which requires group work, teamwork, is the right human resources. It's important where we take experts from. I remember our survey prepared before Euro 2012. We would circulate the survey amongst different institutions and in different regions of Poland. And it was a survey on public order and security. And I remember we received so many different answers to the very same questions. But what we had not expected, or what we had not predicted, was that, all those people knew each other. They would call each other and agree on certain responses. And that's what I often observe these days as well, that responses to surveys seem to be meditated, agreed on. Institutions do not wish to stick their necks out, but science boils down to responsibility, being held accountable, exchanging knowledge, encouraging brainstorming. I always say one thing: I do not need to be the most popular scientist. No, I want to create reality. I want to be able to plant a tree and watch the tree grow. So what I'd like to wish to all of you is more courage. We should be bolder. We should be more responsible. I can see that due to HR policies, due to underfunding, often people do not wish to stick their necks out, are not bold enough. These days, different subjects are in fashion, like, for instance, radicalization. 2 years ago, it was disinformation. In a year's time, another subject is going to be the hot topic. Well, this year, we often speak of disinformation, but let's respect each other. Let's remember that we should all be held accountable. What I would like to say, madam, is what we said yesterday. Tea does not exclude coffee. You are a well-respected expert, and you are popular, at least in our circle, and I do agree with so many of your arguments, Professor. I am happy that you also mentioned cooperation and a holistic attitude to scientific security, and that brings me to our next panelist, Professor Boćkovski. Professor Boćkovski is head of the International Security Department, and he is Deputy Rector for Development of the Department of International Relations. Professor, you're employed at the University of Białystok. I happen to teach there as well. That's a side remark. Professor, I know that the university has been cooperating with the local authorities as well. I remember that you participated in different training sessions on civilian defense. trainings carried out by the local authorities. So how do you perceive the role of the university in terms of resilience building and also in the context of cooperation, international cooperation?
Thank you very much indeed. It is no easy task. The university in Białystok does have a vision, but then there are those 3 or 4 crazy guys who have their own vision, and regardless of what's going on, even without money, they pursue their vision of building social resilience. I guess this is the most important task of scientific entities. On one hand, we need to analyze and pursue studies and research, and on the other hand, we need to translate them into our local reality. And this is no easy task, because in order to act locally, you need to have appropriate resources and people who will be able to work for you and who will be able to work in a very specific environment, which is the local government environment. So you're working with the people who view their life in a different way than we do as scientists. They are about everyday living. They are about answering simple questions. What do I want to be? How do I pay for it? And the university will never give you an answer about where to take money from. But we know there is this huge need. When we first started offering our training, when we first started to go out there, we were continuously invited to join meetings at various municipalities, including border regions, because people want to understand. They don't want to see media people, they want to understand what's going on. And they understand that if researchers come, and they study this area, that this research knowledge will help the society build the community of local people. And this is the most difficult task and the biggest responsibility. Because indeed, when we start building such contacts, we are then accountable for them. We are accountable with what we say, with our knowledge, and we need to assume responsibility for the way these people are going to react later on. What is it that they are gonna learn from our ideas, from our training? So, social resilience, not so much in cyber threat or cyber security. Well, basically we're not talking about cyber security, but we're talking about huge and very powerful cognitive war, which is not only waged by our enemies, that is Belarus or Russia, because cognitive war is the way you pursue politics now. It is a way to get visibility, and it is a way to earn money in the social media. People who cause significant disturbance and cause significant divisions, growing frustration and fear, are doing that because they can earn money on it, provided that they've got a lot of traffic on their media. So not only do we fight an enemy that is using this opportunity, but we are also fighting thousands of people who are doing this solely for financial reasons. And for them, the worse the news, the bigger facts that have been distorted, the more chaos, the bigger amount of fake facts, the better, because they can monetize on that. And we need to be very careful about that. Let's not blame everything on some mythical systems, KGB or what have you, Secret Service of Russia, because 90% of all disinformation and patho-influencers are the people who are simply making money on it. And they don't give a damn about security. They are only about the money. They want traffic, they want money, they want recognizability, they want visibility. They are so difficult to fight, really. At universities, we are now entering the algorithm banks, and we are not able to get our way through to some of those generated by the influencers.
W taki sposób, że
So what we do is when we see young people coming to talk to us that have already been shaped by various algorithms, in the course of the studies, we run classes on fighting disinformation and on cognitive wars and how to recognize them. We try to burst their bubbles and we teach them to recognize certain codes.
Ze studentami ćwiczymy.
So what we do with our students is we exercise disinformation with them and then we try to vaccinate their minds against it. This is key really. A vaccination that can keep you harmless from disinformation. And in this way, these people would be able to become more resilient, would be able to recognize disinformation. This is something that their minds will already be able to catalog. And these students, when they leave our universities, can serve as our crisis management tools. There is no other way, really. We are building things from scratch. We're building certain structures from scratch, structures that haven't been built before, but we're doing it, fighting the entire system, if you like. When people ask me whether perhaps
skutecznie walczyć z dezinformacją.
We can fight disinformation at the level of the state. Well, I think we could. But what would be the response of all the political parties that create the algorithm to win elections? Nobody is going to shoot their own feet. That's why disinformation is not gonna disappear.
Fake newsów,
Brainwashing is never gonna disappear, because on one hand, as I say, this gives you a lot of money if you're a pato influencer, but it is also winning your elections if you're a political party. So as scientists, we are fighting a system that is also fueling us with money, because that's what the reality is right now. So I don't think we should be naive counting that the system will pay money for us to shoot its own food. It won't. Because basically this is the system that wins your elections, that takes you to the local authorities, municipal seats and what have you. So whatever we do, when we try to fight fake news and disinformation, we are doing against the system. We are operating against the system. And that is why it is so difficult to put that into reality. And so this is a huge task looming beyond the horizon of all the universities, that this should be a fight, a struggle really.
Stroną w przypadku uczelni są wszystkie nauki.
That all the science faculties should deal with. What we need is a very well-prepared dialogue to fight disinformation, say, in biology. We need specialists in biology to fight disinformation in biology. We need very well-prepared physicians and chemical specialists to fight disinformation in science. We need the entire structure of the university, because the message is spread across all the levels. Now, what counts is experience as well. The Warsaw University has this big team, and now medicine, Faculty of Medicine is already seeing light. I belong to the team, the special team rather, on fighting medical fake news. We did have this cardiological congress in Krakow last year. There will be a congress on neurology in Białystok very soon, followed up by a new congress of cardiology in Poznań. The biggest problem is not fake news in medicine. The biggest problem, however, is to explain it to a doctor that the information they have to transfer to the patient, looking at perplexity in Dr. Google, is something that doesn't work with the patient because perplexity in Google will pretend to be more interested in the patient, will give the patients the feeling that somebody's listening to them, while the doctor, when seeing the patient, would say, do this and that, and then the doctor is really surprised that they are losing the battle against fake news. They will always lose the battle against fake news. So in human medicine, we need to go back to square one, where the doctor needs to accompany the patient and be wiser than Google, which is probably not going to happen. Not because Google knows everything, but because no doctor would be able to generate an answer to any question, and Google can do that. But fighting fake news starts at the level of scientists and at the level of close-ended languages and narrative that ordinary patients fail to understand. That is why they always find it easier to go online, because this information is then simply comprehensible. This is a very important area, also in the political context, when we speak about internationalization. You started speaking about certain competencies that we must shape in order to build resilience among our students. And now, looking at the scientific institutes, research institutes, in the context of resilience, but also in the context of the personal resilience, say you've got scientific projects going on, how resilient your human resources are. I've got a question to Agnieszka Stefania-Krycko. You've got ample experience by the fact that you used to work for the ministry and then the Polish Academy of Sciences. You were the head of the Polish Academy of Science department in Italy. So what's your take on it? Where is it that we need to invest to build resilience for scientists, for researchers? Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. You scared me about this brain vaccination, although this was an interesting way of putting it. Certainly, resilience building must not start at higher universities. This is something that needs to be initiated at much an earlier stage of education. We did hear about that, so did Magdalena Dobrzańska-Bzowska. And also Ela Dybcio spoke about that yesterday when discussing Estonia. So we need to taught our students the art of critical thinking, and we need to learn critical thinking ourselves. Maybe my generation took too long to arrive there, so maybe it's worthwhile teaching our students to ask questions, to drill and to get to answers. As for high universities, research institutes, maybe I'm a little bit naive, but I feel that the role of scientific institutions and research centers is really great, because they are the ones that verify knowledge, that put some actions to test and come up with well-tested methods. And for sure they can defend us against various dangers and threats. So on one hand, I can say that the role of universities is to become a reliable provider of research, and on the other hand, they may protect us against fake news and disinformation, because they are the specialists there. So this would be one point. Another point, we should also consider the role of the experts. Again, this is a topic that's very significant. The role of experts, namely people who are engaged in fact-checking, verifying verifying various news as they appear in the media, and there's plenty of those. But sadly, we are not able to verify all the facts. But then we can provide expert reports, answer questions, and perhaps even ask questions. Maybe we should also look at another point that is being scrutinized right now in our scientific media, namely evidence-informed policy making. Experts should be invited to contribute to building new legislative framework, new solutions. Again, the other party, namely the universities, need to be prepared to provide this information. Meta-analyses, complex papers and documents are not necessarily the best source for the people who are drafting the laws. So how do we make science more popular? How do we promote it? But first and foremost, how do we make it more palatable? How do we make it comprehensible? Maybe we can work on the language so that it's easier to swallow. Now, speaking of experts,
Szkoda by mi było czasu, żeby nie powiedzieć o wzmacnianiu roli ekspertów.
I think we need to work to consolidate the role of the experts, both from the point of view of universities and from the point of view of our governmental relations. Yesterday, we spoke a lot about financial deficits in the Polish science. Well, it's a problem that doesn't have any simple fixes. But certainly building the body of experts, contributing to their authority, while also using the experts' contributions would certainly make us more resilient. Thank you very much. But resilience is also about being aware of certain threats. Let me now ask Magdalena Dobrzańska-Bzowska. In the NCN, in the National Center for Science, you are responsible for security and safety, and your line of development is also our cooperation with China, I understand. So from your experts' knowledge, because I'm sure you've got the biggest experience and knowledge about the practical approach of building resilient relations, is it really that us, as the academic centers, we have developed this resilience, or is there things that we still need to do? Yes, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for having me on this panel. I represent an institution that is providing financial grants for research. So I'd like to start off by emphasizing one thing that's very necessary. I mean, in Poland, we need to come up with a national strategy for the security policy in research. Sadly, we do not have a national document like that, although other countries do have that. For instance, the Czech Republic has come up with a national strategy for that. Of course, in the UK, but also Australia and all the other English-speaking countries, Canada and Australia, they have already understood how important it is to have such a national strategy for the security of research. And I'm sure this is something that we need to do while talking to all the ministers that deal with science. I'm talking Ministry of Higher Education, but also Ministry of the Interior and other ministries. It is a need that needs to be urgently adhered to. Mind you, starting from 2022, we are a front-line country, whether we like it or not. We have been subject to various hybrid attacks by Russia and Belarus. That's why it is of key importance that our scientists contribute to the ministerial effort that should then be finalized in the national strategy on the security of research. All the procedures within that are very complicated. I recently took part in a very interesting meeting with Paul Jarrett, who is the University Security Unit at the University of Toronto, and he walked us through this practical approach in Canada. There is a team from the University of Canada, whereby all the researchers have got some ample experience in social security, and they speak 9 languages, including Mandarin. Can you imagine Polish situation whereby we would tap such resources of people with long-standing experience in social and secret service and languages? We simply don't have such a resource, and we don't have money to fund such resources. And without that, we would never be able to develop a sound policy of securing research, and the scientists will be left to their own resources, which is such bad news, because the threats are growing. You need to upgrade your knowledge all the time. And at the same time, we need to come up with independent expert think tanks or centers, because scientists are already overburdened with a lot of administrative efforts. If they are now asked to perform additional tasks related to security and resilience, they will simply not be able to make it. Not because they don't want to, but they simply lack expert knowledge, and they don't have the power, the drive, and the time to deal with that. That is why I feel that it's very important that at the national level, we finally start working towards developing a national strategy for the security of research. This will be part of another EU programming period. And very soon it will turn out that because of some passive approach of the Polish authorities, Polish scientists will be excluded from some prestigious financial grants, which would be bad news for all the Polish scientific milieu. As for our cooperation with China, it is not that easy to put your finger on a definition. On one hand, we've got plenty of threats related to intellectual property rights, human resources, dual-use technologies. We understand that China is a communist country. All university faculty members must belong to the Communist Party. But now China is really at the avant-garde of research, and they are also financing it through the nose. They've got fantastic laboratories, and indeed, top Chinese universities made it to the global top. And then we have European agencies such as British UK RIDE or DFD from Germany that have suspended their cooperation with the Chinese authorities, but now they are back to the game. They realize how important and how beneficial it is for European research agencies to cooperate with our Chinese partners. There are some areas in which exclusions are still on, which is genetics, biotechnology, bioengineering, telecoms and communication strategies, but we also have a blacklist of entities from China that are the no-go list. The group of 7 universities that are related to the Chinese army. There is a ban on cooperating with those. But anyway, as I keep saying, the cooperation with China is not strictly a no-go. You have to be very careful, but you don't decline it straight ahead. And we need to equip our scientists with the knowledge of how to maneuver through this muddy waters. And this strategy would be providing some clear guidelines on how international cooperation can be pursued in a safe and secure way. This national strategy would be a guideline and a toolbox for our scientists. What I enjoy a lot in the Canadian approach is that it starts with 2 simple questions. Who do you cooperate with and in which area? Why would you need a foreign partner? Why can't you use a national partner? So it seems like this is a very logical and coherent structure. We are not over-restrictive. we are not closing ourselves down for cooperation, but we're equipping our scientists with some tools for them to analyze the field. I think we should also benefit from something that the Dutch, the Canadian and the Brits have, which is the national contact point. This would be an institution that would answer certain case studies, provide explanations, because not always do we see very clear signals that some area of research may be insecure. There is a lot of gray zone there. When you cooperate with Russia, Belarus or Iran, well, of course, these countries are listed on the sanctions list. China is not. That's why we're not saying no. It's not a blank no, but there are certain threats related to China for sure. Funny enough, all those countries that have come up with advanced strategies for security of research say it all should be country agnostic. Fine, but then when we come to the workshop structure, when it boils down to the nitty-gritty, all the examples of how this country agnostic policy should be pursued are based on our cooperation with China. So once again, let me emphasize how important it is for Poland to develop its own national strategy for security of research. And I really hope it will be rather sooner than later. Let's hope we will first work on it rather than see it in the press that Poland has been manipulated by China or another country. So I hope this strategy will appear sooner than that. Thank you very much. Thank you to Madam Magdalena Dobrzańska-Bzoska. Thank you for emphasizing that internationalization should not be art for art's sake, but it should make sense, it should bring some value added. So what you mentioned, namely that the universities should have guidelines, rules of procedures, perhaps even algorithms for running the research, which would be very important, for instance, in the area of dual-use technologies, but also in other areas related to students who come to study with us from abroad. This is another important area, but we mustn't forget that our panel is about freedom, academic freedom. So the second component is also very important. Universities are open, autonomous. So my question to Professor Gasztold, how do we marry these two elements? Can we reconcile security with openness? Because science is about being open. Over to you.
Let me give you some examples from the Warsaw University. You will remember the tragic events from May last year, what happened at the University of Warsaw. And that sparked a heated debate on security standards, both standards of physical security and digital security, and a team on security standards was established at that time, involving academics as well as security experts who are employed at the Warsaw University as teachers. I believe that if you were ever part of the security services, you will always be part of it. And I can tell you that what we dealt with as part of that team were new technologies, resilience, critical thinking, but also the ethics of scientific research and recommendations on remaining within the Warsaw University buildings. After hours, we introduced special hotlines for students and the academic staff as well. And as regards research itself, I'm afraid of marginalization of human rights, and my concern is ethics, the ethical issues. So I am in favor of designing a strategic document on academic freedom, but I believe that the foundation for that needs to be the international law, some fundamental values, human rights, but often international law appears to be outdated, seems not to be in fashion any longer. Unfortunately, all procedures look good on paper. Whenever there are some instructions or bans, whenever anything is prohibited on paper, it looks good on paper only. So I believe that there should be some interdisciplinary committees that would safeguard those issues, both at the national level as well as at the EU level. All of the challenges, all of the threats out there are now very much political. I've just come back from Taiwan, but no one warned me day in, day out in Taiwan that we live in a world of cyber war and cyber conflicts. Here in Europe, we are constantly being scared. The society of Taiwan is one of those most resistant to manipulation, disinformation. The so-called manosphere and the feminist movement never developed online in Taiwan. It's one of the very few regions in the world which can boast that. Just compare it to our region of the world. But the society in Taiwan is constantly educated at every stage, at every level. There's a coalition of different ministries in favor of enhancing social resilience in the face of crises, in the face of tsunami, in the face of cyber attacks. In Poland, unfortunately, all of the different ministries act like separate silos. They are separate kingdoms that hold power. And there are no benefits for us as society. And so, what I am missing is greater coordination and also an extensive debate at the level of the Conference of Rectors. Professor Maniszewska is with us as the moderator, and we did talk about counterintelligence just before this discussion panel. I happen to be the disciplinary spokesman at the Warsaw University, and I can tell you that we keep acting in a reactive manner instead of being proactive. And the world has changed in the meantime. Hierarchical institutions, ladies and gentlemen, will always be late to respond. And then there's the issue of funding. Whether it's a military university or a public university or a non-public university, there are different sources of funding. And there are different ministries. And the question is, do they really cooperate with one another? The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Science and Higher Education. Well, there are too many puzzles in that jigsaw, and there's no political will, and there's no will of the academic milieu, because the academic milieu agrees to everything, even to a reform that is never going to be enforced. There is a shortage of solidarity. I do not know why, but I am hoping to see some bottom-up impulse. And I'm also counting on what you referred to, Madam Moderator, that the European Commission will impose some requirements on universities. Do you remember the gender quotas at universities? It was a requirement imposed in a top-down manner. And if you ask me whether it has been translated into practice, I can tell you that it looks good on paper only. So whenever we discuss international cooperation, I would very much like to see it as something that goes beyond declarations put on paper. Science is all about individual development. If you think of large technical universities, they know how to be part of a team. They are team players. But a university like the Warsaw University often keeps promoting its image as a prestigious higher education establishment, but such universities rather focus on individual development. And there needs to be team play. And there needs to be exchange of knowledge. But the interest in fundamental values keeps dropping. Those values that serve as the prism of enlightenment through which we should look at science and the world of academia. I know that I have struck a pessimistic note just now. Well, we have ambitious panelists in this panel, but that's just on a jocular note. Professor Gasztold is also head of the International Association Women in International Security. So the gender quotas that you mentioned, I agree with you that often they're there only on paper, but at least they are labeled. At least that phenomenon, that challenge has been labeled, has been defined, and I think that's a step forward, at least a step towards greater awareness. It's not true that there's a bunch of rascals employed at universities. You know who we are. Generally speaking, at the end of the day, we happen to be interested in the larger good of the country, but often we lack the instruments or we lack the awareness. Professor, what about the University of Białystok? You have a branch in Vilnius as well, so your university is highly internationalized and EU-level cooperation has been developed for many years. There are students coming from Ukraine, there are students coming from Belarus. Where do you see, in the area of research or in the area of didactics, a reasonable compromise between openness and security? Let me respond to it in the following. Security and openness, do not walk hand in hand. The more freedom you have, the less safe you can feel. The safer you feel, the less freedom you enjoy. And so we either increase one or the other, and we need to come to terms with the fact. We should also realize that we do not live in a world as we used to know it a few years back. International security, international order is now being dismantled. The world we're facing now is more and more predatory. It is divided into specific areas, and these areas will start competing against one another very soon. I do not have physical struggle in mind, but more and more frequently, the situation is as follows. If you cooperate with China, you cannot cooperate with the US. If you cooperate with the US, you cannot cooperate with China in different domains. And, we will need to get used to it. Let's remember about one more thing. Spies are not placed on one side only. So we cannot call Belarus bad, or China bad, or Russia bad. It would be naive to believe that our allies have not been doing everything they can in order to penetrate, analyze, search for potential assets in the future. That's the way the world is organized all across the globe. So if we believe that dangers are lurking only in some particular regions of the world, it means we can be blindfolded, because secret services have always been present in university structures, have always wanted to have an impact, to be in the know, because universities educate future elites, and future elites hold the decision-making power. So the presence of agents, spies, within university structures is a given, and we do realize it at the University of Białystok. The more students we have from Belarus, the greater the odds that some fraction of those only come to study in Białystok in order to gain documents, take photographs, and do the profiling work involving Polish students, and then take all the information back home, because Belarus is very similar to the People's Republic of Poland. You remember what happened when you traveled abroad. At that time, you were expected to bring some information back, and the influence of the Belarusian KGB is still very strong. So people are often afraid of coming to Białystok. Members of the Belarusian or Ukrainian diaspora are often afraid of visiting Białystok. So counterintelligence protection of international conferences is a given, is something we believe to be only natural in Białystok. Counterintelligence protection of international conferences is required. We are not there to recognize foreign threats, but we should make it possible to the experts to verify who comes in, why they are admitted, under which names, and so forth. Only a few days ago, there was a large conference on drones. So dual-use companies from all over Poland arrived at that conference. More than 200 people were involved. And we had to make a lot of effort to protect the conference. Guests from Ukraine were present, and we really had to smuggle them in. And some of our guests from Ukraine never arrived in Białystok because the Ukrainian Secret Service told us it was impossible. It was too close to the Belarusian border. And the Belarusian diaspora, just a year or a year and a half ago, I remember we met, dinner was planned, but no one arrived. They could actually not trust each other within the Belarusian diaspora. We hold such conferences on a regular basis, but people are always afraid of being spied on. When the war broke out in Ukraine, Białystok was really keen on welcoming refugees from Ukraine. Białystok is a multicultural city. We have many Ukrainian citizens in Białystok, but people were afraid of settling down in Białystok. It was too close to the border. And I remember there was a time when Erasmus students from Spain, Portugal, and many other countries had to report to their embassies every 24 hours, and some people said no to leaving their countries of origin because of the fact that we are believed to be a city on the front line. And that is the reality that we live in. So we really need to invest in resilience building. When Belarusian students come to study at our departments, and depending on the department, every student who applies to study in Białystok even before the application is examined, they need to talk to us in person over Skype. And so there's this interview that is held over Skype. We ask questions, we inquire about their previous education, which primary or secondary school they attended, because already at that initial stage, we want to know who those potential students will be. PhD students, when they come to Poland, they can move freely all around the European Union. And my question to you is, how many of you receive offers via emails stating that they would like to do their PhD studies at your universities? We have received plenty of such applications. So there are typical sugar traps. I remember a case of a student from China. She emailed me discussing her studies, but then it turned out that she actually graduated from a university in Grodno. So it looks very pretty on paper. Or another example, 2 weeks ago, there was a letter of intent that I received from a guy from Pakistan. And again, he even quoted my papers, the papers I authored. And interestingly enough, my colleague, who is a specialist in Jewish studies, also received a very similar letter of intent. And the content was very similar. And, you know, that same person claiming to be from Pakistan sent out all sorts of letters to different university representatives. And that's a typical sugar trap. Well, we need to be wrapping up. Time is almost up, and I would still like to move over to other panelists. Well, I understand that the human being is always the weakest link within security systems. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not to say that there's going to be no international cooperation, no. But we do need some assistance on the part of the state, because we cannot do the job of the secret services. We simply need to be assisted by state organizations. Well, we do not have sufficient time to discuss scientific diplomacy, even though I did prepare a handful of questions on academic or scientific diplomacy. Madam, what would you say scientific institutions need the most in order to be engaged in internationalization of science, staying safe? I do not believe that I am the right person to offer a brief answer, because I believe what universities need the most is, you know, the right amount of goodwill, good intentions. If you're motivated enough, you can accomplish a lot. Those of you who know me will understand why am I saying this. We've discussed security at length here today, but we never mentioned security related to artificial intelligence, and that is a very extensive subject. But one thing that I'd like to mention is how we prepare applications and reviews, and ethical issues are of paramount importance. We need to I'll keep discussing it, to what extent we can take advantage of AI-based tools. No one will give you a straight answer. It is within your capacity to know it, but, you know, preparing reviews, again, that's a separate subject that I am not going to discuss in details now. As regards academic diplomacy, I think we will all agree that a few years back, we thought that perhaps academic diplomacy would no longer be required because we live in a relatively safe world, and we have learned the lesson, and we know that wars bring along no good. And then everything has turned upside down once again, and academic diplomacy has yet again become an important instrument in international cooperation. You need to trust your partner. You need to be able to rely on your partners and their resources. And one more element that I'd like to touch upon, and I'd like to go back to us being experts. We can now act as experts within framework programs. We are not sheer recipients of standards, but we can also think of ourselves as designers of new standards. One final word of summary. Magdalena, could you please elaborate on it? I'm in favor of international cooperation. I am an enthusiast of international cooperation. I believe that at the interstices of cultures where you can discuss issues openly, added value is created. You know, high-quality science is generated in the US, and that comes as no coincidence. Of course, China follows in the footsteps. I think we need to reflect on how to make sure that international cooperation is safe, is not artificially limited, does not contain unnecessary hurdles for researchers. So they should be inspired to undertake international cooperation while at the same time making sure that they remain safe. You know, following 2022, all those issues have gained in importance. That is an important date. Before the year 2022, before the war in Ukraine, things were perhaps a little different. I wouldn't like to see science suffer because of geopolitics. Scientists, researchers should not be the ones who pay the price of those geopolitical decisions that are often difficult to understand. And I am not only thinking of what's going on to our eastern border, but think of the US, the entire Scientific Council of the National Science Foundation was dismantled overnight, and we should be aware of the fact that international cooperation is highly valuable, but please keep it at the back of your head that you need to be able to trust your partners. And I'm really in favor of what the European Commission proposes, as open as possible, as close as necessary. And so we should make sure that our strategic interests, national strategic interests, are safeguarded, because running scientific research is expensive. And results of research conducted by Polish researchers should not go to waste. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And sorry for the slight delay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you to Madam Moderator, Katarzyna Maniszewska. Are you filled with new hope now? Well, at least 2 hands raised. Any of you feels more apprehensive now? Well, more hands up. And who has learned about something new? Okay, this is the majority of people raising their hands. So now is the time to take some rest, grab a cup of coffee. It's okay for you to stand up and go and grab a snack. You know, I am happy to speak at length. My teacher of Polish used to say that, you know, I am a master of verbal diarrhea. Nothing has changed over years.
Naprawdę nie słuchać i dobrej przerwy.
So do not feel obliged to listen to me. Enjoy your break. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome after the break. I feel some good vibes and I receive good news. We are about to start our session number 5. All the panelists are ready.
Witam gorąco.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome after the break. This is the 4th Congress of Internationalization. Here is our moderator, Łukasz Marczak. Please walk us through the panel. The last panel will focus on the impact of internationalization of science and higher education on the potential of local communities in the area of economics. Łukasz Marczak, are you run of podcasts? Maybe you can run podcasts. Well, I should not really be responsible for podcasts because I am not really presenting myself very well. But you've got a beautiful voice. Why don't you go for a radio podcast? There is ample potential. Thank you so much. Okay, Łukasz Marczak. But I don't remember your titles. I'm an MA, I'm a Master of Arts. That's great. We are at par. Would you be so willing as to introduce your panelists? Thank you so much. Anna Baptysz, who is a plenipotentiary of the city of Poznań for science and academia. I do apologize. It's a different title. She is working with the young people and she's also a deputy head of the Department for City Cooperation and Development in the Town Hall of Poznań. Anna Kertyczak is a senior specialist for graduate relations in the Polish-American Fulbright Commission. And Dr. Wieczorek, who is a criminologist and a PhD in legal studies working at the University of Warsaw.
Pan Łukasz występuje w podwójnej roli.
Dr. Wieczorek is wearing 2 hats because he's also a coordinator of the Welcome Point at the Warsaw University.
Jak już wspomniałem, umiędzynarodowienie.
As I said before, we will be talking about the impact of internationalization, and it looks like we are going to be preaching to the choir a little bit. All of us agree that internationalization is important. We may differ in our view on details, what the foundations should be, what our priorities should be, but basically most of us agree that internationalization is very much needed. In our discussions, we quite often focus on the fact that internationalization is really a good thing for the beneficiaries. So when you go abroad, when you go on trips, when you go abroad to study,
Rzadziej mówi się o
It is simply good for you,
instytucjonalnym
but
znaczeniu
we do not
w rozumieniu
discuss
potocznym,
the
ale
institutionalized
ważne jest
internationalization too often, and I guess we should be talking about grants,
dochodach z kształcenia studentów
revenues
zagranicznych
that
na naszych
a
uczelniach.
university earn on providing education to foreign
Jeszcze
students.
rzadziej mówi się o
And not often
problemie
enough do we
egzystencjalnym,
discuss
co
the
na szczęście
existential
spotyka nas
problem
uczelni,
facing the
czyli
universities, namely demographic developments, and how can internationalization save our schools, including higher education. And not very often do we discuss the benefits flowing from internationalization to the taxpayer, sponsor.
Osoby, które powinny być przede wszystkim
People
przekonane do
who
tego,
should
że
be
międzynarodowienie
fully
jest nam
convinced that
potrzebne,
internationalization is something
przyniesiono
we
korzyści nie
need
tylko nam,
and
jako
something we
instytucjom,
benefit
jako
from, not
członkom
only as
instytucji
institutions and
zainteresowanym,
members
ale
thereof,
społecznością.
but also as community at large.
Pytanie do
That's
Państwa.
why I'm asking the first question. Brain circulation and the presence of foreign students and researchers, does it have any impact on local communities?
Tak, no,
Of course,
u nas w
yes.
Poznaniu jakby to jest
In
też
Poznań,
dosyć ważny temat.
This is a hot
My w ogóle
topic.
mamy taką strategię akademicką i
We have this
nauczania
academic
Poznania,
strategy
chyba jak
in the
mamy
city of
w Polsce,
Poznań.
mamy od 20 lat.
I think we are the
Próbujemy
only
aktualizować, wspólnie ze wszystkimi
city
uczelniami.
in Poland that has had that strategy for some 20 years already. We are now updating it, so this internationalization is part and parcel of our strategy, and it made it to the new document that will be updated soon.
Ja uważam, że w ogóle umiędzynarodowienie
I feel that internationalization should not be means to itself,
tylko my po prostu już jakby we wszystkie te cele strategiczne jakby wpisujemy jako rzecz
all our
oczywistą.
strategic goals will be attained through internationalization. In Poznań, we have 100,000 students.
Mogą Państwo sobie wyobrazić na przykład ile jest tych studentów zagranicznych.
And of course, there is a large body of foreign students. Can you take a wild guess? How many of those are foreign students?
Blisko Państwo są mniej więcej w miarę
Yes, you're
tutaj
pretty
wszyscy.
close.
Jesteśmy, z taką średnią krajową właśnie.
This is the
Około
country
8
average, some 8,000 foreign students within the pool of 100,000. Most of them come to Poznań to take a full program, full curriculum, some 6,000, while 2,000 would come for international exchange, including Erasmus. Is it a lot? Is it not a lot? The national average could be higher for sure, although not all universities are driving towards increasing the percentage of foreign students. Sometimes they want to focus on quality. For instance, artistic departments would like to have a diversity among students with a lot of talent pool and not go by numbers only. Having said that, this is a very important group among Poznań student population and Poznań population at large. Well, universities will have to face up to demographic problems, but so will the cities. And we do have our demographic forecasts that we base on various stats and our own analyses, taking us up to 2060. And indeed, the numbers are pretty worrying, because if you're between 19 and 24, you will be the least numerous group in a couple of dozen years. In Poznań, we will not have many young people with professional activity because the population is aging. So this is where we'll see the biggest drops in the age bracket between 19 and 25. We will have a lot of silvers there. Some 80% of Poznań student population come from outside of the town. They are incoming, but mainly from the region of Wielkopolska and from across the country. But I think foreign population will be able to fill the gap, so to speak, and that's very important for the city of Poznań. This translates into economic revenues,
odbiorcy wielu usług.
They
One
use
mieszkają czy w akademikach,
lots of
czy
various
w
services,
mieszkaniach,
staying in
tak,
student
tak,
accommodation or renting flats. We try to do our maths. Some 50% of students would usually stay in student accommodation, the other half would be renting commercial flats. It all depends on the specificity of a given city. Among our PhD students, the internationalization level is even higher. We have some 1,700 PhD students and some 15% are foreign PhD students. So in terms of percentage, it's a bigger number, but in absolute numbers, of course, it's not really 300. So we want to include and integrate our foreign students into various types of activities, and they are taking active part to a significant extent, but we'd still like to promote high activity of foreign students. Sometimes it's pretty difficult to get them engaged in the local community. They are pretty visible in the streets, in various types of activities, but I would say it's always the same group of people who are more committed. When we organized social consultations for the city development strategy, one of the workshops focused on foreign students, and some 20-30 people came, which is not bad. And they said, yes, we would like to be more engaged. We're looking for various types of activities, volunteering, but they are not always in the know where to go, what to do, although the university is trying to provide them with tips and communication on what is it that they can get engaged in. There is a large group of people who simply would not engage themselves, maybe because of an overburden of various impetus, maybe they are overburdened with studies and work, because quite often they would have to study and earn their own money. So they are pretty tired, and if there is any additional activity such as volunteering, this may be a little bit too much. There is overload coming in. But there is this group of students who would like to be more engaged, who come to see us at the consultation hours or workshops, or respond to our queries or surveys, because we did conduct a number of surveys among our foreign students, and some 100 people gave us their feedback. Not bad, I think. This was an internet online questionnaire. I was worried that we will have less feedback than that, but 100 respondents, not bad. Both in the survey and during the workshop, we did ask our students whether they would like to stay in Poznan, and some 25% confirmed they would be willing to remain in Poznan. Now, of course, that varies across various cities in Poland, but there are universities such as the University of Economics where the percentage is higher. I did speak to my colleagues from the University of Economy during the graduate day that will be organized soon for foreign students. Well, apparently the tickets are already sold, so they are here, they want to come in, and they would like to take part in the graduate day. Some of them are already staying in Poznan for good, and I'm sure this is a space to watch. So anyway, the people are here, they are pretty well committed, although sometimes we're living in a bubble, because in the city hall, of course we receive those who want to come and talk to us, but for sure there is plenty of things that we can improve our activities at. Thank you so much. As research confirms, for studies, for instance, international students bring tangible results. This article was entitled "The Impact of International Students on Regional Universities," and I'm quoting after Forbes. This would be pretty important for vocational schools, regional universities, whereby one international student would reduce the cost of education of 2 domestic students. At the same time, some 5 international students can create 1 job for the local community. So, using Forbes and the United States, may I ask Ania Krytyczak to tell us how we build competencies among Fulbright exchange? What about Fulbright graduates? How can the competences gained during Fulbright program be then used for the local community? How can they improve local competences and development of the local communities? Over to Anna Kertyczak. Thank you for your question. Thank you for having me on this panel. There is this stereotype setting in, or a worry really, that we are meeting quite often, namely that, you know, Fulbright stipend is about individual benefit. It's not really a trip, perhaps, but, you know, one person gets to the US, reaping benefits, and then it can be part of your portfolio, part of your CV, and that's it, really. Nothing much happens. Well, what we try to do is we try to find this conviction, because the benefits of Fulbright program are much bigger than an individual. This is a lasting connection prop that I got from Fulbright program. Lasting connection, ongoing relations, because the Fulbright students who go to US from Poland would usually spend more than 2 or 3 weeks. Of course, we do have short-term stays, but usually the Fulbright students stay in the US for 10 months. So this is the time when not only do we see the university, but we also have a very profound experience of the way science is exercised abroad, and this gives you some tangible results later on. And Polish students who go abroad would use a student visa. You may feel it's a very technical aspect, but mind you, they have to use this visa to go back to Poland. So this brain drain is technically impossible, because they have to come back to Poland. So it's all about brain circulation rather than brain drain, because these people would then come back to Poland, sharing their research and contacts. And then they become Fulbright specialists, really. So this is just an example of how a university or local community can benefit from the very fact that a student was sent abroad and then came back with positive energy and experience of how science is exercised abroad, and maybe the student can then encourage the local university to invite specialists from abroad to come to Poland and perhaps to deliver on a specific project here. It is not a very big program, but it gives you the specific option whereby a Polish university can invite an American researcher to offer workshops, lectures, or to run a project, and in this way to strengthen collaboration here in Poland. We also have English Teaching Assistantship, ETA, whereby American students straight after the bachelor degree would come to Poland to smaller academic centers to work as assistants for the teaching of English. So between Warsaw and Poznań, as I'm located here at the stage, I feel that the Warsaw University would not hold a grudge, but the University of Warsaw cannot use this program, and I don't think Poznań can, very rarely, because we would rather be offering these American students to smaller centers. These people should work in Nysa, Piła, Wałbrzych, smaller towns of Poznań, which are not very strong academic centers, and those students are native speakers, of course, but also the representatives of American culture. With this, they offer an additional offering, if you like, of teaching English as they are native speakers. And one more point, which is important for us. Indeed, we may be considered to be living in a bubble. Okay, Fulbright students and Fulbright Commission would include people who are already willing to cooperate, who are already pretty active. But of course, these are the people we want to recruit. We ask them about their activity in the interviews, and we would really expect them to show the spirit of giving back to community. We want people who do not pursue their individual career only, but they want to share what they've gained a little bit after coming back. So we want people who would feel they need to give back to the little town, to the local community, or perhaps to the country at large. So I am not going to dwell on that a little bit, but I will keep one more point to discuss when you ask us about the success story. So one example of what can be done after you've come back from Fulbright program, you can continue working as Fulbright ambassador, encouraging young people to apply for Fulbright program, not necessarily for Fulbright, but perhaps other type of foreign exchange or foreign research. There's a number of opportunities opening up. So just to encourage other people and tell them, yes, this is feasible, this can be done, you can do it. We now have some 10 people who have returned from the Fulbright program, and now they're operating as volunteers to support the academic centers and promote the internationalization idea. Internationalization is falling victim to a number of disinformation and fake news. We just did have this visa crisis that was also about internationalization. But mind you, internationalization is not only an academic achievement, but it is also about international crime. And how would that feel from your perspective, Dr. Wieczorek? You are a criminologist. Thank you very much for this question. Thank you for having me on this panel. I will be wearing two hats in this panel, as a specialist in criminology and as a coordinator of Welcome Point. So let me offer you my explanation as a criminologist. Looking at foreign crime, that's quite interesting. Together with Professor Lasocik, we decided to write a text for the Polish press, because there's been so many texts flooding through the Polish texts about foreign crime, and people do not know exactly what's going on, because there's so much disinformation, so much fake news, and sometimes the society would not reflect on the information they're getting. So what about the foreign crime rate in Poland? Well, the situation is pretty good, as is about the general crime rate in Poland, because it has dropped by 50% over the recent 20 years or so. I'm not sure whether you are aware of it, but we used to have some 1.5 million crimes per year, and this has dropped to 700,000. But of course we do have migrants in Poland, and quite often it is emphasized that migrants commit crime. A point of interest though, regardless of how many migrants we have in Poland, the percentage of crime committed by foreigners remains the same among the pool of general crimes. So we used to have a smaller number of migrants, now, for instance, in the 1990s, but the percentage remains unchanged. We now have some 3 million foreigners in Poland, but looking at the time horizon, some 1% of all crimes committed in Poland would be those committed by foreigners. So years have changed, the number of foreigners in absolute terms have gone up, but the rate remains the same, which is a positive development. And the number of migrants going up while the crime rate is not. I mean, in absolute terms it is, but not in terms of percentage. The rate is still the same. Another point of interest, when you get down to foreign crime in Poland, you see very clearly that over the time horizon, foreigners tend to copy the crime specificity of Polish criminals, namely, this is stealing, this is property, this is driving under influence. So basically they would commit similar crimes and frauds as the Poles do. document forgery, what have you. But basically driving under influence or driving under drugs and then stealing and burglary, which would account for some 50% of crime. So as I say, well, basically the same type of crime is mostly committed by the Poles as it is by the foreigners. And so now, moving on to internationalization, we know which countries students come to Poland the most. That is Ukraine, Belarus. Well, we used to have Russians and Turkish students, but not many more. But as for foreign crime, apparently,
naszych studentów, doktorantów, już nie mówiąc o pracownikach naukowych, to jest zupełnie inny obszar. Bo
it's a completely different area in terms of geography. If we have a problem, if I may call it the way, with foreigners, it is mainly Georgians who commit crime, if I can be allowed to say that way. On average, the citizens of Georgia would be responsible for committing the most crimes. Every 8th or 9th citizen of Georgia would be the one committing crime, whereas in India it would be every 83rd. Well, in terms of India, every 200th. So we must dispel the myth that foreign crime rate is going up in Poland, because it's not. Foreign criminals do not consider any threat, and I don't think this tendency is going to change. They are not constituting any threat for the Polish society. As I said before, some of them are criminals, just as some of the Poles are sadly criminals. But in absolute terms, I would say that the picture is very positive in Poland, and other member states would confirm that. Poland is really a standing out country, because the criminal rate in Poland is going down, and it has stabilized for some time, but it basically went down over the recent years, and so did foreign crime rate. So as I keep repeating, in terms of the rate, it is the same as it used to be over the last years.
Internationalization often feels like the work of Don Quixote, but what does it look like from your point of view, Łukasz? Could you please elaborate on the lack of trust, on the lack of confidence in foreigners, or the lengthy procedures that are involved? Well, I'd like to speak in the capacity of the coordinator of the Warsaw University Welcome Point. I suppose I do not need to explain it to you that the most significant issue is the issue of legalization of stay. There are lots of foreign students in Poznań, as well as foreign members of the academic staff, and the procedures are really lengthy. Sometimes you need to wait for 2 years in Warsaw, and I think it takes even longer in Poznań to wait for the permit of residence. Dr. Boćkowski, I remember, mentioned it, that students are now allowed to come to stay and migrate, but in fact, it's quite difficult for students to move around, because often foreign students are attracted to Polish universities, but then they find it very difficult to leave the country, to move around. Often PhD students at Warsaw University find it difficult to participate in international projects, because they need to wait for their official permit of stay, and without it, they cannot apply for visa to travel to a different country. So really, it involves a lot of cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Things have improved a little with respect to members of academic staff, but it's there's still room for improvement with respect to students. MOST is the online application platform, and maybe that is going to speed the process up, but still the procedure is really, really lengthy, and it definitely is a hurdle and something that hampers mobility of students and researchers, and often that discourages students or PhD students, even though despite those administrative difficulties, they still come. But I've been helping them for quite a long time now, and I know that often they are disillusioned, so I am waiting for things to change, because it's been an issue, the issue of legalizing a foreign student's stay in Poland. And another issue that we should not overlook here is some reluctance within the Polish society towards foreigners. We haven't had ample experience, and I can see that at the welcome point. Even when it comes to concluding apartment rental contracts, the office in charge of it needs to calculate all the fees for bills, and often that takes a lot of time, and again, it's very difficult for foreigners to submit the exact estimates, because when they ask apartment owners to submit it, then owners often believe that it's asking too much of them. So we've been trying to negotiate it with the local authorities, that there might be simplified procedures involved, and often we reach a standstill in these negotiations. And another interesting issue that I'd like to speak about, even yesterday I talked about it with one of our students. For a dozen months or so, she's been waiting for a temporary residence permit for the purpose of studying. She wanted to she wanted to apply to the bank to have a bank account open in Poland, but it's not possible without the temporary residence permits, and it's a vicious circle, really. And I can see that that area of legalization of stay, issuing temporary residence permits, it really requires change for the better. To expect it of an academic researcher, and I remember a particular case of a researcher from Mexico. He had to apply for visa, and we knew that without the visa, applying for the temporary residence permit would take an even longer period of time. And, we knew that he would be interested in attending international conferences in other European countries. And what was required of him was also to take out a health insurance, even though he was insured back at home. So he had to, take out an additional health insurance. He was a PhD holder. He was a member of academic staff, and he had to purchase an annual health insurance, and the cost of that insurance was $1,000. And I really had to explain it to the authorities that if such a researcher decides to come to Poland and is then made to spend half of his remuneration, half of his annual salary on health insurance, then really that is not conducive to internationalization of higher education. Well, despite all those difficulties, we've been doing pretty okay in terms of internationalization, but I would say we're doing okay in spite of the unfavorable circumstances. Right, there are so many different stories of students and members of academic staff related to temporary residence permit. But this is not the only issue, right? Often it is problematic to receive the Polish state identity number, PESEL, and there are other issues at stake as well. Let me chip in here and say that, well, I agree that foreigners may commit crime, but another important issue is whether foreigners feel safe here in Poland. And I would say that it is important for students and their families alike to have confidence in the fact that it's safe to study in Poland. Poznań, the city of Poznań, happens to enjoy the reputation of an open and safe city. And I remember that the city town hall has always promoted that narrative, that Poznań is an open city, tolerant city, and safe. And I think it's really important that there is this uniform narrative that is promoted at the level of local authorities. Poznań is never the first choice for foreign students, but the fact that Poznań indeed is a safe city means that most foreigners who decide to study in Poznań arrive in Poznań upon the recommendation of their friends and family. So that is usually the response that they give us. Oh, I have come here to study because this city has been recommended to me by my friends, acquaintances, members of family. So we're very happy to enjoy that reputation. You know, apart from some isolated incidents, really it is a very student-friendly and safe city. And it's important if you think of the well-being of foreign students. And of course, the voivodeship office is in charge of legalization of stay. But what I'd like to say is, what might be of interest to you. I remember that a few years back, under the initiative entitled Study in Poznań, and the initiative gathers different universities, and within that initiative we've been exchanging experiences and good practices, and I remember that we once discussed it, that it takes a long time to receive the temporary residence permit. I think the average duration now is 8 months. So we kept thinking of what might be done in order to shorten that period, and eventually we drafted a letter to the local authorities, to the voivodeship office, stating that indeed it is important for foreign students to have the temporary temporary residence permit as quickly as possible. And I can tell you that we have been partially successful, because at that point in time, I remember 4 people within the voivodeship office were entrusted in streamlining the temporary residence permit procedure. Well, this is not to say that it worked miracles, and it's not the case that the duration of the procedure was reduced from 8 months to 6 months in all cases, but in some cases it is now definitely shorter, and there are now sort of university contact points, people employed at individual universities who are in charge of streamlining the temporary residence permit procedure. So that's what happened. And you know, individual persons have been appointed as responsible for responding to electronic applications, and I think foreign students have noticed the change. They now have a contact person dedicated to temporary residence permit, and that is the person who offers training on the temporary residence permit or instructs students whenever legal regulations have been amended or when there are sensitive situations and you need to delegate a PhD student to attend a conference abroad, then often it's possible to accelerate the procedure with the help of those contact persons who are now in charge. So this is an example of a good practice in Poznań. But if you ask me why we've been successful, it's quite difficult for me to say. I think it boiled down to a lot of goodwill on the part of the then voivod. And, you know, it's always a matter of sitting down together and trying to figure out what might be done in order to streamline the procedure. And we've been successful. We've made it. And I can tell you that at my university, 3 people are now delegated to assist foreign students in terms of the temporary residence permit. So that has made the procedure much easier. And the welcome point at our university, at the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, also holds weekly meetings dedicated to foreign students. So foreign students are invited to come, inquire about the different procedures, and also submit the application in paper. So it's a very friendly space. It's located in the very center of the city, in one of the university buildings. So it is a great space for integration, and there are free of charge consultation sessions held every week. And I think that was a game changer. I think it's the only such initiative in Poland. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were the first ones to introduce such a solution in Poznań. So you can do it. You can do it. And of course, it's always thanks to the goodwill of the local authorities. So we are really thankful. Students and PhD students and members of the faculty benefit from it. I have a question to Anna Kertyczak now. I remember one of the first Fulbright scholars at our university, and she talked about, you know, the intercultural differences. For instance, it was quite surprising for her that she had to supplement vitamin D in Poland. And I understand that it's important to offer some cultural preparedness for scholars who are about to arrive in Poland. It's true that it applies both to Americans coming to Poland as well as Polish students and academics who are about to leave for the US. And we refer to it as orientation. Even last week, we held a meeting for another cohort of Polish scholars leaving for the US, and these are the so-called orientation meetings. Let me say a few words on security. Poznań is a safe city, Ania said, and Poland is a safe country in general, and this is usually what we say to American scholars, that Poland is safe. And we also teach the same to Polish students or scholars leaving for the US, that perhaps it really makes no sense to pick up a fight in a street in the US because there are people carrying guns, unlike in Poland. So it's a little different, and you may want to be a little more cautious, and maybe you should not be picking up a fight in a cul-de-sac because you might end up in a fight with someone carrying a gun. Imagine someone coming to Poland from sunny California who's about to, initiate the scholarship in October. So they come in the middle of summer. It's the honeymoon period. But then starting with the fall, the rainy season begins, and there's very little sunshine, and it's usually the low season, and especially for young Americans who might never have traveled abroad, and it's their first time abroad in Poland. They have no one to speak to in English, so during the orientation phase, and also beyond orientation meetings, what we try to prepare is a friendly, friendly climate or friendly atmosphere here in Poland. There's this program that we call Fulbright Buddy, and under the program we search for people who might be interested in, accompanying those American students or scholars, show them around, maybe show them a nice pub or cafe, or just talk to them over a cup of coffee. So that's one thing. American scholars, Fulbright scholars, also have their mentors at universities. And so mentors are there to help them out with different administrative issues, but also they serve as the middlemen. They make them familiar with the local holidays and celebrations or sports competitions. They encourage them to participate in different social events. During the orientation meeting, there's usually a session dedicated to cultural shock. And often those American scholars who used to study in Poland talk to the prospective students about what they found shocking. And you know what they found, what they often find shocking? What they find shocking is that we stare at people, we stare them in the eye, and it's really not comfortable for Americans, but apparently it's enough to stare back, and that does away with the problem. Yes, vitamin D supplementation has been mentioned. That's always something that they find curious. And, the proverbial Polish smile, the fact that we happen to smile maybe differently. We sort of smile inward rather than outward. And that is something that strikes Americans as odd. And also, whenever they ask, "How are you?" we do answer. We do not limit their response to "everything's fine," so they need to make sure that they have a quarter of an hour to listen to the response. And I think that's more or less it, unless you have some other questions to me. No, thank you. My two last questions will be combined, and I would like to ask you, Ania, since you're holding the mic, to share your experience with respect to overcoming the largest challenges, but also referring to the success stories in the area of internationalization.
Well, those won't be my success, but the success of our graduates. Where do I start? Maybe I start with an anecdote. When discussing administrative burden and difficulties, I don't know whether you realize there was this lady, Sofia Corradi, who went to take part in the Fulbright program from Italy, and then he came back to Italy, and the time she spent was considered a trip, and she never really thought it was something valuable, and she came up with an idea of Erasmus. So in a nutshell, this is an anecdote that demonstrates how important internationalization may be, because it can change our approach, our attitude towards science, education, towards the world, and then translate into specific programs, specific implementation. From the Polish-American experience, I can see some examples, not so much about implementation of something post-Fulbright, but there's a number of graduates who went from Poland and to the US to study, to pursue their PhD, and then they stayed in the US for some time or for long, but because they knew where they were coming from, they also realized how important education is in Poland, and so decided to launch some programs in the US that would then enable Polish researchers to come to the US for biolab programs, for instance, and other academic programs. Zygmunt Derebenda from the University of Łódź came up with a program that's been around for some 25 years. And another program, which is very close to my heart, is Top Minds. It's a mentoring program that I'm currently the coordinator of. Krystyna Malińska from the Polytechnical University of Częstochowa was the initiator of this program. She realized that after a number of stipends and international programs, she saw so much development going on and many things that can be shared and should be shared with the younger generation, with younger academics. So Top Minds is a mentoring program with mentors being Fulbright graduates and top 500 innovative graduates. And there it is about the cascade approach for the young people who are only embarking on their academic career. And you will be mentored by a PhD, by somebody with some proven track records. And you can, for instance, learn from them how to write your PhD without going crazy, where to publish, how to pursue this career, how to find an academic center abroad, which country would be the best for you to spread your wings and to develop on your studies. So I think this Top Minds mentoring program is a success story that demonstrates that internationalization of science is not just a point in time where you spend some 10 months abroad, but this can be translated into many years of academic career in which you simply give back to the local community. Łukasz, a question to you. Welcome Point at the Warsaw University, can it cooperate with local institutions, local entities, and if so, would there be some tangible benefits for the Welcome Point or for our foreign students? Well, there are benefits for sure, and we try to cooperate. Apart from those formal cooperation framework, we do not enjoy our cooperation with the local voivode perhaps too much, but we have very good experience with working with our Office for the Foreigners and some council entities. So apart from the local platform, the Warsaw University Welcome Point has been around for some 10 years. At the recent conference organized at our university, we achieved many researchers from other universities who were very willing to gain some experience from us, whom to contact, where to run the studies. And this is really such a good example. In a week or so, we will be receiving our colleagues from the University of Silesia who are arriving on a study visit. This Thursday, we're organizing a special event whereby together with the local student authority, we are showing various cultures and diversities. This can, of course, stir some problems. A year ago, we did have a problem. I'm talking about the conflict between Israel and Palestinians. So this event was not organized last year for political reasons, because it was immediately after Małgorzata, a colleague of ours, got killed. I was sadly almost an eyewitness of what happened to Małgorzata.
Może nawet lepiej, bo jeszcze
And this was not organized last year, and maybe rightly so, because it was prone to so many protests. Police had to enter the university campus back then for the first time after the martial law. So the situation was very dynamic. But anyway, the cooperation is possible, and I'm very glad to say that many universities would get to us, would try to reach out to us. And this event of a city at the brink of different cultures is our attempt to speak to a local society, local community at large. So there's a number of various initiatives, and I think there could be more in the future. What we are trying to develop, also through this new building that we have, is about Welcome Point being a right place whereby foreigners can legalize their stay, but also treat it as a place where they can come in, discuss, perhaps make appointments to go out to the city, to meet other students. So a little bit like Fulbright. Anna, you did say that Polish people are not smiling. Well, I cooperated with fantastic Finnish students. Well, maybe the Americans should be brought to Finland. You will see people who do not smile at all. Nice as they are, they simply don't smile. So there is a number of solutions that we can still pursue. Anyway, NAWA, Welcome to Poland program, a number of initiatives. So I guess this is the development direction for Welcome Points. The initiatives that can pursue integration and promote integration. Because it's not only about formalities, but these foreign students may feel alien. If you have a Ukrainian student, okay, that's more or less the same culture circle, but if we are talking about foreign students coming from Asia or America, there are so many things that we can still improve to make them feel more welcome. Leah, who was a Fulbright coordinator at our university, used to say that one distinctive feature of Polish is the cynical humor, sarcastic humor. And she also said that the biggest culture shock for any student is actually me. So a question to Anna Babdysz from the city of Poznań. Walk us through your success story in the city of Poznań. How successful are you in integrating foreign students arriving to Poznań? Are they part of the city life, so to speak? There's so many aspects of this cooperation. So if I was to tell you our success story, I'm sure you are cooperating with various city authorities, but there may be some local initiatives that you may get inspiration from. So we have awards, we have stipends, we have special recognitions for the best MA thesis or the best PhD, and of course they are open to foreign students as well. And quite often it would be foreign students winning these competitions. There is recognition, but there is also financial award attached. I think you can also use support from the City Council in the area of integration. Say you cooperate with an NGO, and the universities would have different foundations that they cooperate with. And this is such a nice call that can be used for an organization so that it can organize some integration activity. And we have also organized some sports events to integrate, and we don't really want those dedicated events that integrate Polish society, but also international community. That's so very important. And this is like sport events that can be used for Polish and foreign students and other integrative events. For instance, Poznań Silent Night. It's an important event whereby we sing the Silent Night in many languages. And this is really very nice. there are the NGOs that would win
organizację takiego wydarzenia. Czy różnego rodzaju,
and various
to w ogóle
types
mogą być, bo to jest dotacja od miasta, nie? Czy to mogą być na
grants.
przykład takie szybsze, małe granty do 10 000
short grants up to 10,000 zł, which is an easier
takie duże konkursy, już wiadomo, takie roczne,
way to get money, and then annual projects,
czy jakby NGOsy działające przy uczelni.
and then the NGOs can use it.
Potem myślę, że fajna inicjatywa to też mamy
Another cool initiative, open lectures for distinguished scientists from all around the world who are invited for an open lecture to deliver a speech, and we provide grants for that. So there is a competition organized twice a year, and the universities apply for grants because they want to invite a distinguished scientist. Well, this generates certain costs because you have to pay the flight, pay the accommodation, and this is how we can help the universities. We provide opinion on the grant application, we consider it, and these are not huge amounts. Such a number of grants can differ on the amount of money that is needed, and in this way we can actually meet some costs and also write a contract. Of course, some money has to be spent up front because an airfare needs to be purchased, and then the university is settling the bill. So we are able to provide this financial support, and in this way we also co-funded Welcome Point for all the students, all the foreign students, and in this way we integrated them into our life. So the city is able to provide such financial grants for NGOs, for the universities, because according to the Polish law, a university can obtain grants from local authorities. So it is possible and it is being used. We also have special stipends for foreign students, but this is something that Poznań does on its own. We did have stipends for the nationalities, whereby there's been some very difficult situation in a country of origin. So we did have special stipends for Georgian students, Syrian students, and now we have special stipends for Belarusian students. We simply chip in, that is the city of Poznań as well as the voivodeship office chip in for the stipend, because many students were fleeing the Belarusian regime. They didn't enjoy systemic support from their own state, like for instance the Ukrainians did. So we decided that we must focus on those countries that do not offer a helping hand to their own students. So we do it through stipends, notation, grants, so there is direct financing possible, such as we do for the Polish students. The city of Poznań is simply paying a monthly stipend, but we can also provide grant for a university, for the university to have the stipend program, and then the university will be administering this program at its own end. Another very important aspect, which I failed to mention already, is congresses, international conferences, and we have special units dedicated to that. In Poznań, for instance, we have the Poznań Convention Bureau, which is an entity that supports the university in attracting international conferences and congresses. And there is ongoing collaboration in the organization of international conferences. We prepare the entire offer. If, say, a global association of anthropologists would wish to organize a congress, then we of course want to win the venue. We want to compete for that congress organization. And this offering is a number of pages long sometimes. So as for success stories, I think this is very important that we were able to attract that in 2027 we'll have the International Astronautic Congress happening in Poznań. This is top of the top, the largest space event in the world, and the very fact that we won organization of this Congress is a huge success, not only of the city of Poland, but of city of Poznań rather, but of the entire country. So Poznań Convention Bureau was applying for that. The mayor of we tried to win it twice. We once lost it for Baku, and then we won it. So in a few years' time, this Congress will be organized in Poznań. Our mayor, the mayor of the city of Poznań, was very much committed to that, was always promoting Poznań. So when you are determined, when the city really wants to organize an important event, you have to operate through various consortium. Here we had the International Poznań FERS cooperating with us and the Polish Space Agency, as well as Polish airlines, LOT Polish Airlines. We also cooperated with the Technical University of Poznań. So various stakeholders contributed to this success. So this is a success of many players. And I would like to say that this is really a national success and a great opportunity for the university, not only in Poznań, but also for other universities. We will have some 12,000 people arriving for this Space Congress. There will be fairs, there will be exhibitors, a number of companies will be present, so it is such a great chance and opportunity. At the end of the day, this Congress will be completed with the so-called public day. You don't need to enroll for it, you don't need to pay a fee, but you can still participate in this public day. So it's a joint success of many stakeholders. We are here in Kraków, so I'd like to say that we have been supported by Professor Ull from the AGH University of Kraków. He co-authored our application. So as I say, this success has many parents. So the Space Congress 2027, there is a 2026 Astronomy Congress, a smaller one, and then there will be this Global Congress of Anthropology. And just to conclude, we really need to jump at this opportunity. If you have a convention bureau, you may want to reach out to many stakeholders. You can negotiate with hotels to provide discounts, or perhaps public transport should be free of charge or discounted for Congress participants. There is a number of initiatives that can be pursued, cultural program. Quite often participants would arrive with their families, and they also leave significant money in the city, so the city is benefiting from it. So it's a win-win, really, and I hope that you will also be able to benefit from these inspirations. And yes, I'd like to leave it at that. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you kindly for participating in this panel. It is now 1:45, so we are back on time.
Jak nie idzie w minus, to możemy kontynuować.
No właśnie.
So we were able to
Chciałbym ciebie zapytać o Fulbright.
finish on time. Ania, a few words about Fulbright graduates who become ambassadors, who work for the Congress, who have delivered on this impact factor of internationalization. However, I can see our watch guardian giving us very strong signals that we need to run. So thank you very much. This is the end of this panel. Over to the organizers. Thank you very much indeed. Łukasz, a question to you. What is this Polish sarcastic humor all about? Apparently we are ultra sarcastic as a nation, and when we reply questions we are being malicious. Well, never happened to me. I never observed. Who of you thinks this may be true, that Poland is a sarcastic country? Well, this may be some useful propaganda. One more question to Anna. What about this staring? When you stare at somebody, do we need to stare back? Perhaps we had to improve the way we stare at people. I do not agree with everything that has been mentioned about the Polish national trait. I wonder whether all the nations are more outgoing. In a hotel, there was this girl speaking English over her computer, and I looked at her and I thought, well, maybe I'm staring, I shouldn't be staring. So there may be something about it.
Coś w tym spojrzeniu
One more point about the staring. I loved when Ania mentioned that they don't feel very comfortable with Polish people staring at them. Recently, I was looking at my students and I could feel they were not very comfortable about me staring at them. Should you pursue this or not? Sometimes you need to feel not that very comfortable in your daily work. Yeah, but I would continue to stare. You need to observe your environment. This is one of the foundation of security. And would the students then write something about you staring at them? Well, I've got very good student reviews.
Są zadowoleni.
Thank you so much. I know you want a family photo. Alexander, can you come up to our panelists and take a family photo? Ladies and gentlemen, this is not yet the end of the Congress. We would like to offer you our thanks on behalf of the National Agency for Academic Exchange. So a photo op is happening as we speak. And in a moment, we will hear some last words of the Congress.
Państwo już opuszczą scenę a propos tego poruszania.
Right. Thank you very much to all our panelists and a warm round of applause for our speakers.
To jest też ciekawe takie
zjawisko. Interestingly enough.
Torebki lepiej nie zostawić.
Please take your bag.
Może bezpiecznie wracać do Poznania. A jeszcze pani coś... No o właśnie, bo mieliśmy dzisiaj pytanie, jak to jest, że tak wielu państwa jest z nami do samego końca i tutaj pani Ania dobrze wskazuje, że przecież...
Ania has rightly indicated that there's still lunch ahead of us. Lunch and lunch break, correct? Yes, they are waving at me to indicate that indeed there's lunch break ahead of us. Well, NAWA, ladies and gentlemen, is a brilliant organization. Dr. Łukasz Gołota, the deputy director, is going to summarize the Congress for us. Ladies and gentlemen, the most determined of you have stayed. I have the pleasure of concluding this fourth Congress on the internationalization of higher education and science. The internationalization strategy is your accomplishment. NAWA is the owner of the process only, but we wanted to make sure that as many people representing different circles are included in the process. We've been successful. The strategy is out there. Of course, we're going to continue working on the strategy, listening to the voices of all of you, but hopefully the new strategy will delineate the new directions for development and will make our daily and laborious work more systematic. I remember when I asked for an international cooperation office to be established within the structure of the Warsaw University, and in the past I was looked at as someone possibly insane, but now we know that internationalization is the essence of university life. Researchers are no longer locked up in the basement, but they participate in networks of international collaboration, because otherwise it's impossible to develop science. And I would like the Polish science not only to be following the trends set by others, but to be the trendsetter as well. I would like to extend my thank yous to the panelists. I'd like to thank the moderator as well. A round of applause is well deserved. I am tempted to say something sarcastic, but perhaps I will not do that. I will not follow up on that temptation. Thank you to the host, thank you to the AGH University, and thank you to the entire team of the National Agency for Academic Exchange. There's the upper row as well.
Proszę Państwa, naprawdę proszę mi wierzyć, bo widzicie Państwo, staramy się dbać o każdy szczegół, ile to pracy i wysiłku.
We have made an effort to organize this meeting, and we've also put all our heart into it. So this 4th edition of the Congress is now officially closed, but the 5th Congress is upcoming, and I am sure that the venue will be interesting and the subjects under discussion will be interesting as well. NAVA keeps an open door to all of you. You're always welcome. When in doubt, please make sure to contact us. And now I'd like to invite everyone to delicious lunch. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for your kind participation and your smile, even if you've been smiling with the proverbial Polish smile. Thank you.